Welcome to It Matters, where we cut through the noise and dive deep into the issues that really shape our world. This isn't just another political podcast. This is where we call out the lies, expose the corruption, and challenge the status quo. Whether it's dissecting the latest political circus or spotlighting the real heroes fighting for justice, we're here to give you the unfiltered truth. So buckle up. It's time to get real, get informed, and get ready to be honest. This is It Matters. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to It Matters. We've got from the Young Turks. Cenk, how you doing, man?
Good. How you doing, Michael?
I can't complain. A lot is going on. What's it like kind of watching the switch from Biden to now Vice President Harris and how quickly it happened?
I mean, I love it. And with Biden, we had a near zero chance of winning. Now, all of a sudden, we're the favorites. Mm-hmm. So you can't ask for better than that. Look, we say it on the Young Turks all the time. You've got to stick with the facts and you've got to stick with the reality.
Yeah.
Just going with what you want doesn't help you at all. It just ignores objective reality. And so Biden was clearly too old, and just denying that for so long didn't help the Democratic Party at all. So what I want people to take away from that is a couple of things. Number one, change is often really great.
Yeah.
Because most people will scare you and go, oh, no, don't do change. Don't do change. Just stick with the status quo because you never know what happens in change. Yeah, something great can happen in change, especially when you're at a near zero chance of winning. So that was terrific, and I think a lot of people are excited by that, and I want people to remember that next time. And the second thing I want people to remember is, look, Democratic leadership is not some sort of geniuses that MSNBC makes them out to be. They're enormously fallible. Oftentimes, they have no idea what they're doing. So when they say, oh, trust us, Biden's the best candidate, do not trust them. Don't trust them next time either. So on the other hand, Kamala Harris has done a fantastic job out of the gate and picked Tim Walz, and that created an enormous amount of energy. So far, she's been, just near perfect.
Yeah, she's been a rock star. It's interesting. I remember, right after the midterms, I wrote this column for the Daily Beast, and I said, Biden's had a great first term. Now's the time to turn the chapter. He should announce the day after he's not running for re-election. Got a lot of flack, got a lot of emails, calls from DNC, White House people. What are you doing? Even leading up to him announcing he was going to get out of the race, a lot of flack. Why are people calling him to get out? What do you think it is about Democrats? Obviously Republicans, they're not going to call for Trump to get out, but it was so obvious that the switch was going to flip once he got out of the race, and not for nothing. Up until the very end, he wasn't going to get out. I'll never forget that moment where they asked, if you lose this election and Trump comes to power, what's your reaction? He said, as long as I give it my bestest shot, I'll be fine. It was the most tone deaf moment I have ever imagined. It's when I really got angry about the situation. How did Democrats walk themselves into that scenario?
Look, that's why I said what I said at the beginning. Look, Joe Biden and people in power can have any opinion they like, and their opinion is almost always me stay in power, me above you. Okay, and look, let's keep it real. These politicians are obsessed with their egos and their legacies and their reputations. So if you don't know this, and there's no reason for you to know it at home, but in Washington, one-term president is considered loser.
Yeah.
And two-term president is considered historic. And so there's a giant difference between loser and historic. So that's why Biden was like, no, I must be 2 terms, right? But brother, no. But so he doesn't want to let go of power because he's a normal egomaniacal politician. Okay?
Which you had to become president. You have to have that narcissistic, you have to believe in yourself bigger than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. And that kind of attitude drives me crazy. But guys, that's not the important part. The important part is that we not listen to them. So when the DNC said everybody bow their head, it doesn't matter if your eyes tell you he's too old and your ears tell you, it doesn't matter that he can't walk or talk. Nothing matters. Shut up and bow your head. That is not what the Democratic Party should be. That's what the Republican Party should be. That's authoritarianism. That's lack of intellectual debate and rigor and a process that works and is inclusive and believes in democracy. And Michael, I know this better than anybody because I was so frustrated by this madness that I entered the primary.
Yeah.
And I'm not a natural born citizen. That made it took it from improbable to just
Impossible.
north of impossible, just a smidge above impossible. So why did I do that? A main reason was, well, look, we're on the board of the Titanic here. Somebody's got to lunge for the wheel. Otherwise, we're going to hit the iceberg. So I lunged for the wheel. And when I did, the DNC was vicious. And by the way, their number one tool that they use, let's be honest, is the media. Mm-hmm. So they then have the media yell at you and say terrible things and say, put out the theory that you're trying to help Trump. I'm like, how is desperately trying to beat Trump helping Trump? You know what's helping Trump? Keeping a candidate that can't talk.
Yeah, you of all people, you could be accused of a lot of things, but trying to help Trump just ain't one of them.
100%. I mean, look, in 2016, I did literally 100 loser Donald segments with different facts on why he's a loser in each 100 episodes. This time around, we're doing TrumpBrackets.com. We're going to do like March Madness style.
Yes.
The 64 worst things he's said and done. We're in the elimination. We got so many submissions. We got hundreds of submissions.
This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, so we're narrowing it down to the top 64 right now. So go participate if you can at TrumpBrackets.com. So, yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. That's how absurd they are, that they would say that I was trying to help Trump. It's beyond absurd, but as long as anchors on MSNBC say it, people believe it, and that's the power of the media.
What do you think happens? Look, I get nervous when I talk about, like, if Trump loses, where does the Republican Party go? Because I don't want to get Democrats too complacent or too excited about it. But realistically, if Trump loses, Republicans have embraced him so tightly. Like, what happens? Because this idea they're going to be a regional party, like, is he gonna foment insurrection again? Like, there's so many questions. What do you think?
No, I mean, look, if I was Democratic Party, I wouldn't be within a million miles of complacent. Mm-hmm. So number one, this election is not anywhere near over. So I'm thrilled that Kamala Harris is now the favorite, mm-hmm. but favorite doesn't mean guaranteed at all.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton was the favorite. I was on that campaign and I remember how that ended.
Yeah. And so part of it is don't get overconfident and make mistakes or start playing prevent defense. That's the worst. Yep. So that's why I love what they're doing so far. They're attacking. Go on the offense and stay there, right? So that's terrific. But anything could happen in terms of strategy, but also in terms of wild cards. So, for example, if they don't sign a ceasefire in the next couple of days, mm-hmm. Iran is going to do a significant bombing campaign of Israel. And next thing you know, we're in the middle of a giant war in the Middle East. And which way does that play out? No one knows. Could that swing the election? Of course it can. It depends on how Kamala Harris and Donald Trump react. So we can get back to the issue of Israel in a second because that's an.
It is. I had Joe Walsh on the show, and I'm very interested to get your thoughts on Israel. But you've seen the Democrats. The messaging has changed. The tone has changed. I mean, the Kamala Harris comms team, many of whom were the same people under Biden, the voice has been completely different. What effect do you think that's had on the race?
It's had all the effects in the world. And so, look, I thought if she picks Mark Kelly, we're in a lot of trouble because not because Mark Kelly's the worst or anything like that, although mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of great things to say about him. I think he's a corporate Democrat that doesn't add anything to the ticket. But the number one reason why I would have been concerned is because that meant they thought they were ahead and they were going to play prevent defense and just pick a guy who's vanilla, right? And that's mm-hmm. the Tim Kaine strategy. Yep. And that is not the right way to go. And so I was thrilled that the last two were Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz. And I was stunned that she picked Tim Walz. Stunned. That's playing offense. And Walz has been great. His popularity is the highest of the four candidates in the race. presidential and vice presidential. But also to go back to your earlier question, after this election, even if Trump loses, guys, I'm going to say something that's going to surprise people. I think that not only is the Republican Party not in disarray, but that they're closer to the right answer politically, not policy wise.
Hmm.
And so, what I mean by that is people aren't thinking in left right terms as much as they used to. They're thinking in populist versus establishment terms. And the Democratic Party is still way too wedded to the establishment.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to get that off of you. The average guy hates the establishment. And so what I know after Trump, they'll go in a more populist direction, and that's politically advantageous for them. So here's a guy I'll tell you. Look, I hope Lucas Kunce beats him in Missouri, and maybe we're done with him at that point. But if Josh Hawley wins his reelection, he has taken an interesting turn where he's not taking corporate PAC money anymore, and that frees him to be more populist and more popular. So don't count out the Republican Party when overall in a super rough waters, choppy waters, with a total madman at the helm, but their boat is headed in a slightly correct direction, and the Democratic boat isn't, in my opinion. So Tim Walz can get us on an actual populist path instead of a fake populist path, right? And real populism is 10,000 times better than fake populism. And I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying. Not only is Trump crazy, but Trump and Vance are elitist.
Yeah.
As Walz says, real estate baron and venture capitalist. They're totally fake
Vulture
populists.
capitalists.
Yeah. So we got to make sure that that we stay on the right course. And so a lot of times, again, the DNC and Democratic leadership is going to tell you, don't. We have to take corporate money in. We have to do 89% of what the corporations want. And that's not the right method. Go more in the Walz direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, is the country ready for a woman president? Is the country, were they ready for two progressives on a ticket? And it feels to me like the most successful Democratic candidates have been the ones who leaned into being Democrats. It's Barack Obama, like all these questions about whether we were ready for a black candidate, a black man or a black person in general. The second we got him, America's excited. Like they want young candidates. They want fresh, authentic candidates. And every time we tell people they've got to swallow the pill, I think of Hillary Clinton. I think of Joe Biden. If it hadn't been for COVID, I mean, I don't think Joe Biden would be president. And so I wonder, what are Democrats going to do to respond to the next generation? How are they going to bring in more young people?
Yeah, look, if this is a political advice I'd give to either party, again, about politics, not policy, is don't do any identity politics. And America, don't worry. America is open-minded and open-hearted, okay? So, and right now, Kamala Harris is handling it perfectly. So she's letting the Republicans do identity politics and attack her for being black, attack her for being a woman, etc. And that turns off the average American. If you leaned into it in the wrong direction and said, you have to vote for me because I'll be the first black woman, that would turn people off, right? And you don't need to, because they're going to do your job for you.
They can see her.
Yeah. And first of all, they know, right? Second of all, Trump will do your job for you. He'll attack you for being black, for being a woman. And he'll make a mess of it. And then you'll gain sympathy and you'll get the moral high ground, et cetera. In terms of whether Americans are ready for it, guys, please stop panicking, okay, about like whether it's a woman, it's a black person. In the case of Buttigieg, I don't like Buttigieg as a candidate, but people are worried that, oh, he's gay. Oh, don't worry about him being gay. They don't care.
Yeah.
So the people who care are always going to vote for Trump.
Yes.
Okay. So don't worry about that third of the country, right? You're trying to gain independent voters, and at most suburban Republican, like the couple of Republicans left that aren't pro-Trump, right?
Yeah.
And so those guys, they don't care. How do I know they don't care? Look, everybody, by the end of the election in 2008, everybody knew that Barack Obama's full name was Barack Hussein Obama, right? After inauguration, his approval rating was 83%.
That's like Bush right after 9/11.
Yeah, 83% is unreal. real. That is a monster number. That
Yeah.
is an amazing number. So that's 83% of the country saying, we don't care that he's black. We don't care he's biracial. We don't care that, his middle name is Hussein. We don't care. We just want change and hope.
Mhm.
And those are the things that he campaigned on. So they don't mind that Kamala Harris is a woman or any of that stuff. So put it out of your mind. Get excited for who she is and policy. And you're absolutely right. Lean into who you are. I think the best example is when Clinton picked Al Gore.
Yeah.
And they're like, what are you doing? That's two Southerners that are similar, young. Da, da. No, if you got a winning hand, you double down.
Absolutely.
Okay? And so, and in the case of Kamala Harris, to be honest, I don't think she's a progressive.
Mm-hmm.
But if people perceive her as a progressive and she then gets Tim Walz, who's an actual progressive, great. I'll take 1.5 progressives over none any day.
Which is true. And what do you think it is about Tim Walz that he's more popular than, as you mentioned, anyone else running in that little foursome? Like, he has connected in such an authentic way. And I know they're trying to do the coach thing and label him like that, but like, people genuinely like him. In my grandmother, who was a teacher and then a principal, during his introduction to Philadelphia, like, she got teary-eyed.
Yeah, there's two reasons why people love Tim Walz. First is he's not a robot.
Mm-hmm.
And you might think that's a low bar, right?
It's easy enough.
Yeah, no, most of them are robots. So, like, they do the framing, but I think the framing's old school from the 1990s. I don't think it works. So, like, when they say, like, oh, Joe Biden's just little Joe from Scranton, I'm like, brother, we got eyes, man.
Yeah, right.
He's been in D.C. for the last 50, 60 years. Don't tell me he's the average Joe from Scranton. That just sounds absurd, right? But when Tim Walz goes out there and talks, especially without a prompter, people go, oh, yeah, that guy's real. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Not acting, not fake. And actually from Minnesota and originally Nebraska, and actually a football coach. Not like, oh, I did it for 1.5 years so I could have it on my resume when I run for office later. No, he did it for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
He was an actual teacher, an actual football coach. So that's huge. That authenticity is huge, and everybody can sense it. That's why none of the attacks on him are landing at all. It's just bouncing right off of him, right? And the second reason is there's something magical about having an actual track record where people can see, oh my God, look at the bills he passed. Jesus, he passed like a dozen amazing laws.
Biggest middle class tax cut, like free breakfast and lunch for kids at schools, like
paid family leave. I mean, child tax credit. These are incredibly popular bills. Look, I want everybody at the national level and also at the state level, wherever Democrats are in charge, to do the Minnesota model and look at the results it's gotten Tim Walz. So, politicians, you basically have to appeal to their ego. You too can be super popular if you pass popular bills, right? And for Walz, look at the magic happen, because when you see the authenticity and it's combined with actually delivering, well, that's gold, and that's the gold we have now. I mean, I can't believe we got this lucky, but it's not just luck. You have to give Kamala Harris credit for making that right decision. And that's what an executive does.
Yeah, I mean, I like Josh Shapiro a lot. I didn't think that having a West Coast attorney and an East Coast attorney together was going to be the right mix. Plus, I like Josh Shapiro's kind of Obama-esque thing. But if you hear it over and over again, it hits the same note. And I worried it was going to get mocked when SNL came into season.
Yeah, so I like Josh Shapiro a lot too, and I thought he was the second most progressive, and it showed courage in standing up to Wall Street and donor class, and very popular in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of good things to say about Josh Shapiro. Obviously, I don't love his position on Israel or protesters, but I don't on Israel. I don't mind it. I'd rather have someone who loves Israel and is motivated to bring real change than someone who doesn't care as much about the issue. So, but you're right. Actually, his number one problem was he overdid learning how to speak like Obama. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Yeah.
So he's got to work on that over the next couple of years here.
Yeah.
Because I can see how that would get grating. Because you know what it does, Michael? It triggers people's inauthentic radar, and and you don't want that. And I don't think that he's
I don't
necessarily
think he's
inauthentic.
inauthentic at all. The
Yeah.
comment he made in Pennsylvania during the rollout, where he talked about his faith, I thought was the most defining thing I've heard him say in since I kind of knew who Josh Shapiro was, in his defense of his faith and not backing down, given a lot of the commentary about, like, his comments about protesters being Ku Klux Klan members or whatever. Like, it was a stupid comment. I know he wishes he had never said it, and he got caught up in the moment. But where do you think Shapiro goes from here? I mean,
Yeah. Look, as I said earlier, if I was in charge, I'd go on the offense and stay there, right? So in this case, what that means is I would try to persuade Shapiro to become Secretary of State and say to him, "Listen, brother, I know it's the hardest job in the world, but what did we get into this for? Go get us peace in the Middle East." So, look, I think AIPAC and Netanyahu did a hit job on Shapiro right at the end there. Uh,
absolutely.
and I think that Fetterman coming out so strongly against Shapiro was not an accident. And I
No.
don't think it had anything to do with a theoretical beef from a decade ago in local politics.
Mm-hmm.
And so a guy like Shapiro could be Netanyahu's worst nightmare because he could say, look, you're not going to claim I don't love Israel. That's absurd, right? And so we're going to get a solution here with a beautiful, free, and safe Israel and a beautiful, free, and safe Palestine. And that's the direction I'd go. But I know it's asking a lot, and it's very, very, very difficult. But look, asking them to get past the donors in any category is very difficult. So that's why I like the Minnesota model, where he took it one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, paid family leave. I know corporations don't want it, but it's not the end of the world for them. Let's go get that win, right? Then child tax credit. Yeah, they don't like that one either, but it's just a second small step forward. Boom, we got that one. And then you build up your wins and get to a point where you've kind of built the muscle of defying your donors in a meaningful way and getting more and more stuff done for the American people and hopefully for the world.
What happened to Fetterman? I mean, he was supposed to be this progressive former lieutenant governor who was going to get to DC and tell everyone, the truth about themselves. And it feels like he's gotten to DC and turned into mansion in a sweatshirt.
Yeah. Look, it's so hard to do pop psychology on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can guess at Fetterman. None of those guesses are comfortable. They're
Yeah.
all, I mean, I honestly think the best case scenario is like a Kirsten Cinema thing where he got there and he's like, oh, I'm an incumbent now. I take
Yeah.
donor cash.
That's kind of what it reminds me of, actually. That's a very good analogy.
Yeah. And I just stay here forever because as long as I'm loaded up on donor cash, I can't lose now that I'm an incumbent. And so I think that's actually the most charitable way of looking
Mm-hmm.
at Fetterman. And it's not great. And it's poorly played too. If he had stayed in the populist progressive lane,
Yeah.
well, that's the lane Tim Walz is in. You knucklehead, you could have been somebody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Go to DC and become a corporatist like everybody else.
Yeah, it's so dumb. It's so dumb that I'm afraid that there's something else behind it, but I don't know what it is, so I don't care. But what matters more is Washington's a hell of a drug.
It is.
And once you get there, why you got elected often slips from people's memories. And this whole thing of I am a representative, I am a senator is intoxicating. And everybody treats you like royalty. I actually look, I'm gonna say, I don't know if your audience or you will find it controversial, but I
Yeah.
don't think that politicians are the best of us. I think
No.
9 out of 10 times they're the worst of us.
hundred
And
percent.
so
Most of the people in DC are people who got picked last in gym class, who have this need to be loved and aren't in it to do good, but are in it to have people follow them around and take their picture. Like, it's a rarity that you get someone who's there and believes it and is. I always say every politician has to be willing to lose, and if they're not willing to lose, they shouldn't be there.
yeah, and so, but again, unfortunately, we come back to media as being one of the culprits here because so so our show Young Turks is on every weekday at 6 o'clock Eastern.
Fantastic show. Everybody make sure you go tune in.
Thank you so much. And so we do a long show. We do 2 hours, 6 to 8 p.m. And so we'll have politicians on from time to time. But everybody, we've now developed a reputation, which all the media should, which is that we do really hard interviews with politicians. And so, and some of them respond great. Tim Ryan, who I don't always agree with these days, but he's just terrific in sticking with his positions and not being bothered by hard questions. Ro Khanna is awesome at that.
John Delaney. That's how you and I first met. My former boss, John Delaney. Yeah.
Exactly. John Delaney was such a champ.
Yeah.
There's so many things that we disagree on, but he just stood there and made his case and did a terrific job, right? So I always think, what's so hard about that? If you really believe it, as John does, it's easy to defend, right? But most politicians don't like that.
Yeah.
And it's developed a culture of you have to kiss up to them if you want an interview. And the interviews have to be complimentary, and there's an edge. You have to have a fake edge where you ask slightly hard questions, a couple of questions, and that to make news, etc. But the rest is fluffery. And this kind of attitude is, again, it leads to their intoxication because they're surrounded by people that are constantly telling them how great they are when they ain't that great.
They're not. And there's a weird ancestral part of DC that I don't, unless you're part of the world and stuff like that. And like, I grew up in DC, so it even more so, I kind of laugh at people who come into DC and think it's all West Wing. But like, the analogy of this is I knew someone in the Trump administration who made a career of going on TV, and I won't call them out just because I don't want to be a dick, but they would go on TV, rail against MSNBC every day, talk about how horrible all these people were, and then at White House Correspondents' Dinner, ask me if I could help them get into the MSNBC party, and then would be at the MSNBC after party taking pictures with everyone there. And it's this weird dichotomy of like, there is a pace with every segment on cable news where it's like, you get a question, the next person gets a question. You get 45 seconds to answer, the next person gets 45 seconds to answer. Then there's going to be a question that'll cause a little bit of conflict, but you don't yell over each other, or you try not to be too mad. And there is a beat to it all. And do you think at a certain point, it just has ruined the ability to actually have a real conversation?
Oh, definitely. And, I was a host on MSNBC, and there I experienced the guardrails, right? Yeah. There's certain guardrails, and you can't go past them. And I remember I got into a heated argument with an ex-congressman who was a Republican who was proposing to cut Social Security. So I let him have it. And afterwards, I was told, take it easy.
Yeah.
That's a former congressman, and you have to treat him with a lot of respect. I'm like, he's trying to cut people's Social Security.
Yeah.
He did not earn that respect. Right. And so, but
also he puts his pants on like everybody else. Like, he's a public servant. He's not a demigod.
Yeah, 100%. So look, there's great people that work in cable news and at MSNBC. Chris Hayes, a really good guy, smart guy, moral guy. Ari Melber's an old friend. I can go on and on, right?
Eamon's great.
Yeah. And so, but they got to work within the guardrails and within that process and system. I don't think it's a good system or process. I don't think it's healthy for media or for politics. But when I say that, I get banned. So,
well, I've been banned from a couple of networks too, so I know how it feels. One of the big guardrails in democratic politics is Israel. And I have to admit, even as you try to have the conversation about Israel and about Palestine and Gaza, you've always got to be really careful, because one wrong statement can get your whole career thrown off. And so in that, I ask, how do Democrats figure out how to talk about Israel and separate the fact that Netanyahu is a war criminal, who is an awful human being, who is doing what he's doing and massacring people, much like Trump, because he doesn't want to go to jail?
Yeah. So Israel's a government, and governments oftentimes go on a wrong path and oftentimes do terrible things. So, for example, I'm originally from Turkey. Has the Turkish government done terrible things? Of course,
Yeah,
they have.
Erdogan, not exactly known as the nicest person in the world.
Yeah, and just as a general concept too. So, well before Erdogan in the 1980s, for example, a cousin of mine, they thought that he was a communist, so they tortured him. Okay, so like if you say, hey, the Turkish government shouldn't do that kind of torture back in the day, or they shouldn't do something today, that doesn't mean you hate all Turks.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, right? But when it comes to Israel, and for understandable reasons,
Mm-hmm.
people constantly equate the government of Israel with Jewish people overall.
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy. You have to separate out the two. Those are not the same thing, okay? So Jews don't, quote unquote, act in a certain way. There is nothing like, oh, the Jews do this or the Jews do that. That's nonsense. It's totally not true. It's detached from reality. Don't understand how the world works if you think Jews do X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah. It's like saying every black person can dunk. I can prove to you it's not true.
Right. And so this tribalism is madness, right? Now, having said that, then the side that supports Israel then says, okay, that's why you can't criticize Israel because that's criticizing Jewish people. No, no deal. No way. No, that's not a thing that exists. My wife is Chinese. I get to criticize the Chinese government or the government of Taiwan, where she's originally from. This is not a thing where you get to say, because I'm a special victim historically, and you are. I'm not, there's no question about that. You are not allowed to criticize what a government is doing now. So keep it on the government, keep it on the right-wing government of Israel and how they have to change, etc. And when you do, though, that means I get to say whatever the hell I want about them. And it is a slaughter. And the idea that they are careful and a moral army that is trying not to kill civilians is absurd. We have eyes and we have ears. Don't tell me that dismembered kid that I saw in Gaza the other day was, not Israel's fault. Oh, Hamas made us do it. No, they didn't. So Hamas did something terrible on October 7th, and I condemn it on the day one to today. And 34 poor Israeli kids killed that day. It breaks my heart. But now we got a stadium full of Palestinian kids, 15,000 kids. Babies, 3-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 7-year-olds, all dead, butchered, right? And so I'm not going to take it easy on Israel at all. What they're doing is monstrous, and the occupation is a moral cancer on the world. But remember, within Israel, there's a wide variety of opinions because there is no such thing as the Jews do this or the Jews do that. They have different opinions like every other human being. So let's try to push Netanyahu out and replace it with a leadership that'll deliver the Israel we all want, which is a safe haven for Jews that is peaceful and cooperates with their neighbors instead of constantly bombing their neighbors. And if you don't think Israel is the aggressor after 57 years of brutal, oppressive occupation, if you don't think they're the aggressor after bombing 3 different capitals, Tehran, Beirut, and Damascus, you're just living in an alternate reality. You sound like a Trump person. Oh, no, I think he won the 2020 election. No, or, by the way, a Biden person who was like, no, he's not too old. He's so young and dynamic. And no, Israel
can outrun every member of Congress was like the weird line that they would say.
Yeah, look, Israel has now killed 35 times the number of civilians that Hamas did. So you're on the wrong side of this, and you got to get off of there because it's not just destroying the Palestinians, it's destroying what Israel was supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, Netanyahu's making the argument that he's got to root out Hamas because it will make Israel safer, but by carpet bombing civilians, I mean, not only are you now creating a whole nother generation of people, obviously, who hate you for good reason, but it's making the chance of peace almost impossible now. I mean, there are potentially talks that are supposed to be ongoing, and Netanyahu kills the people who are participating in those talks. there's always that famous quote where he says, like, peace isn't, what is it? Like, the point of getting peace isn't actually to get peace. Like, it causes conflict, all that kind of stuff. Like, I know the people want peace, but the factions, do they actually want peace?
Oh, no. I mean, look, that's the thing, guys. Again, you know how we talked earlier about it? It's becoming less about left versus right and
Mm-hmm.
more about populist versus establishment. And in the case of Israel and also here in America and in a lot of places in the world, also in Turkey,
Mm-hmm.
it's becoming it's basically the factions against and it's not the factions against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like in this particular case, it's the hard right wing Smotrich, Ben Gavir, who are I think indisputably fascist,
Mm-hmm.
who say the Palestinians basically aren't really human. We can starve them to death, we could torture them, we could rape them, and it's still moral to do that. That's disgusting. And then Hamas, and I view those guys, yes, they're theoretically against each other, but I actually think they're on the same side. They're on the side of war
Because it comes around. It's a circle.
Yeah, and they're at war not against each other, but against the rest of us. Mm-hmm. Those of us who are in the middle and who just want decency and morality and peace, and we want both, the citizens of Israel and the citizens of Palestine to get to that moment where they get peace, etc., and don't have the tribalism. But that's the problem. The factions love the tribalism. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think they're lunatics on both sides. And they think, oh, the Jews are the chosen people. The Muslims are the chosen people. Allah talked to us. Yahweh talked to us. And when they did, they told us to murder all of you.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, but you sound like you just escaped from a mental asylum. And you've got all of us, you're basically taking us hostage in that asylum. And so and guys, there's not, like, the Palestinians don't have a lot that they could do about Hamas. Until they become a state, they can't have elections. Once they become a state, I hope that we have a system where they can have elections and real elections, mm-hmm. and have those have consequences, etc. Right? But Israel does have real elections, and if you don't reject that tribalism and you don't reject this extreme right wing who's treating the Palestinians in the ways that the Jews were treated in Europe. Mm-hmm. And again, if it breaks your heart, I'm sorry, but it's an absolute fact. Look at the pictures of the starving children and tell me that doesn't remind you of the 1930s in Germany, right?
Yeah, I mean, they blocked off food, water, medicine from getting anywhere near people who are suffering.
Yeah. So Israel's got a super important decision to make. If they stick with the Netanyahu or anyone else in the hardcore right wing, we're going to have perpetual war, and it is going to be an absolute disaster for the people of Israel. Because, and then last thing on that, Michael, whenever anybody thinks they're invincible, they get overconfident, and that's exactly when they run into trouble. Yeah. And Israel feels absolutely invincible right now. And they think we can bomb any capital we want, any mm-hmm. country we want. We can kill 40,000, 400,000. These are nothing these Palestinians can do. We have them under our thumb. They don't think under our thumb. They think, oh my God, they're dangerous terrorists. They're about to kill all the Jews in the world. No, they're not. They have almost no power. Yeah. I mean, you guys have all the jets. You have the nukes. You have the American military behind you. Wake up. You're not David. You're Goliath, right? And so... And what happened to Goliath?
I do wonder real quick about, you had mentioned Josh Hawley, and this rise of Christian white nationalism we're seeing again being tied to Israel, and how dangerous it is, especially for the rest of this election, because you got people like Josh Hawley who are cemented in this idea that, like, the Temple on the Mount is their holy land, and like there's actual, like, old school Christianity that's, like, flowing into this. And there are people who actually want to see, like, a full on holy war. And so how does, and I know this is a weird question, but how does Kamala Harris deal with the fact that we may see, like, a real regional conflict while she's running for president? And then two, like, how do Democrats start talking about Israel and talk about what's going on in a way that isn't this like out of touch, inhumane thing, but calling it what it is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different elements to that question, right?
Yeah,
So
sorry.
first, yeah, no, that's okay, because it's really interesting question with a lot of nuance. So first of all, I think in my experience, Jewish Zionists are very genuine and authentic, and we might disagree on some issues or maybe a lot of issues, right? But they actually think that Israel's in trouble and they're trying to help Israel, etc. And so I think that they're being counterproductive, but I get it, right? Christian Zionists are the most dangerous people on earth.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're Christian. We all of our religions, in my opinion, are the same. We're the best, and God loves us the most.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a
different name, same kind of, yeah.
Yeah. But so it's not because they're Christian, it's because they have more power, and their particular ideology is bonkers.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't mean Christianity. Most of the country is Christian, right? I mean Christian Zionists, Christian nationalists. And those folks believe in end times ideology. And end times ideology is not in the Bible. It's actually some idiot pastor in America invented it in the 1970s, and people started believing it. And it has all these series of steps. And what Israel has to have the win over the occupied territories. They have to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they have to start World War III. So these lunatic Christian Zionist leaders are going around literally trying to start World War III because they think that leads to Armageddon and almost everyone on earth dies, but Jesus comes back. So they think they're among the special people who will be saved. So they don't mind that in their lunatic theory that Jesus comes back to slaughter 7 billion people, but at least Jesus likes them, right? So those are very dangerous people. And unfortunately, they have affected about a quarter of the American population. And that is an enormous base of power.
It is.
And so, and again, it's not the people in the congregations. They're generally good people who are being taken advantage of, right? Who are looking for hope and who are looking for help in their lives. It's the crooks that are the leaders of that movement that create this dangerous situation. So we have got to stop listening to those folks. But the good news is that the Christian nationalists no longer have enough numbers to be able to win on their own. And so they've always had an alliance with corporate executives, because corporate executives think, oh, we'll use these suckers to get us tax cuts, and we don't care. Yeah, like, oh, yeah, sure, Jesus will come back. But for now, we have the tax cuts, okay, suckers. And Israel felt the same way, and Ariel Sharon would say this. He'd be like, yeah, a bunch of loons, but hey, they keep sending me billions of dollars. I'm not going to say no, right? But they don't believe them, right? So, but nowadays, they don't have enough. They used to be at near 50% of the country. They're now all the way down to around 25% of the country and dropping, right? So, and the corporate executives, there aren't enough of them. They have a lot of money, but they don't have a lot of voters. So the Republicans now have another faction, and that faction doesn't agree with the Christian nationalists. So they have an interesting problem on their hands. That faction is what I call the bro faction, right? And so that's the Joe Rogans and the Dave Portnoys and all the bros who are like, yeah, man, trans issues are the worst. Can you believe the trans weightlifters? I hate them. Yeah, okay. Bros should be in charge.
Yeah, Dogecoin and all that stuff.
Yeah, Dogecoin. Yeah, I mean, I lost money, but hey, Elon Musk took it, so maybe it was a good thing. I think you just got robbed. Anyway, okay, so... But the bros don't agree with the Christian nationalists on, hey, give up all your freedom and give it to some pastor who has 18 jets, right? They're like, no, brother, we can tell you're.
Yeah, they know what that is.
Yeah. The bros are like, we can tell a con man. We'll see. Right? And they don't want to give up their freedom. They actually, for them, the freedom thing is not as much of a bullshit talking point as it is for the Christian nationalists. The Christian nationalists don't believe in freedom at all.
No.
They would turn us into the Taliban in a minute and make us all follow their version of extreme Christianity. But the bros actually kind of do mean freedom. And so even on an issue like abortion, almost all the bros are like why are you getting into their lives?
Yeah.
Right? Even though it mainly affects women, they're like, I don't get it, man. That seems like big government, not small government.
They would have been old school libertarians.
Yeah, yeah. And good news on that front too. So you see how complicated the world is. It's not black and white. There's good news and bad news in all of this. And the good news is that the libertarians are turning into progressives.
Yeah.
I mean, they are agreeing with us on 80% of issues. They hate war. They hate that corporate donors get everything they want. They get how corrupt the system is. And then when I start talking about paid family leave, you would be shocked at how many right wingers are like, yeah, wait a minute. Moms don't get any time off after they have a baby, and you're saying we should give them 12 weeks off so they can spend more time with their baby. They're like, of course we should do that. So,
I'm watching my friends have kids, and we're all realizing how important this stuff is, especially as we get more kind of globalized, and you realize that what people have access to in France and, in all these other countries, and you come to the US and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. So I'd say one more thing about that, because I want people to be realistic and realistic in both directions. Just because you find out that the Democrats have some faults doesn't mean that Donald Trump is right. Okay. So don't think in a binary way. Donald Trump is wrong on 200 things and he's about 100% wrong. So this is not a commentary on Kamala Harris or Joe Biden and the Democratic Party vis-a-vis Trump or the Republicans, just on their own. Right.
Yeah.
So I need you to not just be realistic. Okay. So why didn't they pass paid family leave? It's at 84%. It's intensely popular. 74% of Republicans want it. It's a layup. I'm not at all joking or exaggerating. If I was in charge, I can get it passed in 2 weeks. Okay. And it's not a braggadocio. It's simple. All you have to do is say, okay, Republicans. In fact, they could do it right now. They could do it in the middle of the campaign. They could say, look, Republicans, we're going to pass this right now or right after the election, after we rout you guys. And so your call, which one would you like? And that would turn the whole campaign into a campaign on paid family leave, because then if the Republicans say no, which they will because they work for corporations, then, hey, let's get rid of them so that we can get this bill. And if you say, well, Cenk, are you want to bet it all on one bill? Yeah, it's at 84%. Yeah. Okay. I mean, do you want to fight on 50-50 ground or 84-16 ground? This is not complicated math, right? And the reason that Joe Biden didn't do it is because his corporate donors told him not to. Yeah. And so if that breaks your heart, I'm sorry, but that's reality. So we have to strategize as Democratic voters. How do we get Democratic politicians to do the things that they actually promise?
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part, because when you say things like that, when I say things like that, you get criticized as not being a good Democrat, or you're not falling in line, or, there has to be more.
I got to jump in right there. If you're a Democrat and someone tells you to fall in line, they're in the wrong party. Yeah. Okay. Republicans are supposed to fall in line because they're supposed to be the authoritarian servants who say, oh, yes, sir. Yes, alpha male. I will give in to you, alpha. I have no mind of my own. If you're a Democrat, that's embarrassing. Don't do that. When they tell you to fall in line, and always ask this question. It's very easy. Because the number one cudgel that they use, and if you don't follow politics intensely and you don't know this, it's okay. It's not your job, right? Yeah. So the cudgel they use is unity. Mm-hmm. And it sounds good. So a lot of good people believe it. They're like, oh, we should be unified to beat the Republicans. That makes sense. But they never tell you, yes, but unify around who? Right. So when I say, okay, unity, I love unity. Let's unify around Bernie Sanders. They're like, no way. You're terrible. You have to unify around my guy. Oh, so you don't want unity. You want compliance. Right. So let's all figure out who the best candidates are and who the best policies are, and then unify around those policies, most importantly, and those candidates, but not before we decide. Okay. And they want you to do it before you decide, because they want to decide and make sure it's not you that has agency. Fight for democracy within the Democratic Party as well.
Perfect. I think that is a perfect place for us to end. Cenk, where can everybody find you and where can they tune in?
Thanks. So first of all, TYT is our network. Young Turks is our flagship show that's been around for over 2 decades, oldest show in internet history. So we're on Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. You can get it on YouTube is kind of our headquarters,
Where I
even though
watch.
we're on
Yep.
Facebook, Samsung, every kind of platform there is. You can just type in TYT anywhere. But now, if you go to TYT.com, we actually have the 24-hour network embedded in the website. So
That's
super
dope.
easy, TYT.com. And then while you're there, please play Trump Brackets. It's a fun game. The worst things that Donald Trump has ever said or done. If that's an easy way to go to there, is TrumpBrackets.com.
I will definitely be checking that out. Everyone will be checking it out. Cenk, thank you so much for coming, and we will definitely have you back on as we get closer to the election.
All right, sounds great. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for being with me today. Share this episode with others, like and review it, and please keep learning all you can so that you can make an informed voting decision this year. Come back next week for more Truth in Politics. I'm Michael Starr Hopkins, and this is It Matters.